Yeah. Hello everyone. Good evening and welcome to week 12 of the live interactive sessions for the course on integrated waste management for a smart city offered through NPTEL. I am Sedu Vinayagam, a PhD scholar in the civil engineering department at IIT Madras. We'll start with the overview of the concepts covered in the lectures of week 12. So this week we continued with the e-waste management. So the first lecture we looked at the e-waste management and handling rules. So this set of rules for the e-waste management came in the year 2011, and then the further revision of this happened in 2015. And so we looked at an overview of what is there in the rules, right? What is the objective of having this e-waste management rules, and who are the different stakeholders, and what is the responsibility of each of these different stakeholders in managing the e-waste produced in the country. And moving in the second lecture, we looked at continuation of these rules, and then we looked at what are the global issues that are present in e-waste management. So what are the issues that are persistent all over the world, not just in India, and how in some cases these e-waste are getting exported to some poor countries, so where these are not being properly managed, and that is leading to a lot of health and environmental issues. And then in the third lecture we looked at how do we characterize the e-waste. So we looked at municipal solid waste characterization in earlier weeks. So similar to that, we also looked at how do we characterize e-waste, because e-waste contains some hazardous material. Therefore it is necessary that we characterize it and properly analyze it, so that we do not contaminate the environment. So we looked at the TCLP test, right? How do we apply that for the e-waste? And then we also looked at the generation rate of e-waste. So how over the years this e-waste generation is going on, right? So we see an increasing trend. So that is non-linear, right? It is increasing at an increasing rate. So we are producing more and more of these e-wastes, and but however uh, the handling of this e-waste is not done in a proper way. So in 59, we actually looked at the TCLP test performed on WEEE, and then the recycling of e-waste, right? So how e-waste should be recycled and how it is being improperly recycled for most of the e-waste that we are generating, and the issues associated with that, the health issues and the environmental issues. And then in the final lecture, we again continued with the recycling process, and also what happens to the e-waste that cannot be recycled, right? So what to that portion of the e-waste that cannot be recovered, reused, or recycled, so it has to be disposed of. So what are the different options for disposal? One is landfilling, another is the waste to energy or the incineration plants, and what are the uh, issues associated with those processes. So we looked at that, and that concluded the last lecture, right? So with respect to these concepts, we look at some of the questions. So the first question is, which of the following is the responsibility of the producer according to e-waste management rules under the Environmental Protection Act of 2011? So the options are to obtain authorization and registration and ensure that the facility and recycling processes are in accordance with the guidelines. Option B is setting up collection centers or take back systems either individually or collectively. Option C is do not process any e-waste for recovery or refining unless he is registered with the State Pollution Control Board as a recycler. Option D is none of these. Okay, so you can take a minute to think about it and you can answer in the chat. So we are talking about the producer, right? So which of these is the responsibility of the producer as per the e-waste rules of 2011? Okay, we have one answer, option B. Okay, so we'll take a look at the correct one. So option B is the right answer. So setting up collection centers or take back systems, either individually or collectively, is the responsibility of the producer of the electrical components or products, right? According to the e-waste management rules. So this comes under what it is mentioned as the extended producer responsibility, right? So in the e-waste management rule, they included this extended producer responsibility that means that producer is responsible for this e-waste management at all the stages of the product's life cycle, right from the manufacturing until the end of the life. So the producer has some responsibility in the management of the e-waste, right? So as part of that, the producer is supposed to set up collection centers or any take back system. So if it is some small components, the consumer could mail them back to the company, or if it is huge product, so they can have dedicated collection centers so that the waste is collected properly from the consumers, right? So this is a responsibility of the producer, right? So we saw this. So the producer has to set up collection centers for the e-waste, and they also need to come up with financing and organizing a system, either for individual, either by themselves or through collaborations. And also they need to provide contact details and create public awareness about improper disposals of these e-waste, so that the environment is not contaminated. So question 2 is, which of the following is not a responsibility of collection centers according to e-waste rules under the Environment Protection Act 2011? The options are: ensure that the e-waste collected is stored in a secured manner till it is sent to the registered dismantlers or recyclers. No damage is caused to the environment during storage and transportation of the e-waste. Option B is collection of e-waste generated during manufacturing from the end of life of the products with the principle of extended producer responsibility. Option C is maintain records of the e-waste handled in Form 2. Option D is obtain an authorization in accordance with the producer procedure under Rule 9 from the SPCB or the PCC. So out of these four, one of them is not a responsibility of the collection center. So we need to identify which of these is not. Okay, we have an answer for option D. Okay, any other answers? Okay, we have another answer as option A. Okay, so let's take a look at which is the right one. So neither A nor D is the correct answer. It is option B which is correct. Right, so A, C, and D are actually responsibilities of the collection centers as per the e-waste rules. So the first one says that the collection center has to make sure that whatever is the e-waste that is collected, that is stored in a secure manner, and then it is sent to the registered dismantlers and recyclers, right? And in that process there should not be any damage caused to the environment, right, during the storage phase or the transportation phase. So this is the collection center's role, right? So their sole process is to collect the e-waste from the consumers right? And then keep it stored until it is transported to the for further processing, either by the dismantlers or the recyclers, right? So that is the role of a collection center. Their role is only to collect the e-waste and store it, and then transport it to dismantler or recycler as it is deemed necessary, right? So that is actually responsibility of the collection center. And then C says maintain records of the e-waste handled in form 2. The rules also require that records are maintained so that we know what is the how much e-waste is being generated and how much e-waste is being properly handled, right? So we need so the rules require the collection centers to maintain the records. And option D is saying they should be authorized by the SPCB or the PCC, right? So unless they register and get authorized, they cannot they have to do that if they have to set up the collection center, right? So this is actually something that is required not just by the collection center but by other establishments and facilities as well. For example, dismantlers, recyclers, so they also need to register themselves and then get the authorization from these state pollution control boards, right? So that is like a general criteria that applies to many different stakeholders as well as the collection centers as well, right? So A, C, and D are correct. So the only option that is not a responsibility of the collection center is option B. So this we saw in the previous question as well. So we talked about the extended producer responsibility, which is the producer is responsible for the collection of the waste from the manufacturing phase till the end of life phase, right? So any e-waste that is generated during the life cycle of the product, so the producer is responsible for the collection of all those e-waste, right? So that is a responsibility of the producer, not the collection center. So option B is not the right one for the collection center. Right. So we saw this. So the for the collection center, the responsibility is to obtain the authorization and then ensure that there is no damage caused during the storage and transportation of e-waste that is collected. Okay, so question three is we are given a set of responsibilities in the second column. We have to match those with the correct stakeholder given in the last column, right? So the responsibilities are ensure that the e-waste generated is channelized to authorized collection centers, dismantlers, or recyclers, or is returned to the pickup or take back services provided by the producers. So the second responsibility is setting up collection centers or take back systems, either individually or collectively. The third one is ensure that no damage is caused to the environment during storage and transportation of e-waste. And the stakeholders are dismantler, bulk consumer, and producer. So we need to match the responsibility to the stakeholder. This should be easier now because we have already seen some of these responsibilities. Okay, we have one answer, option D. Okay, another answer is option A. Okay, so but the right matching is option D, right? So let's start with what we have already seen. So setting up collection centers or take back systems, either individually or collectively. Right, so we already saw this as this comes under the part of extended producer responsibility, right? So they have to set up collection centers so that all the e-waste generated throughout the life cycle of the product is so there is a center that collects it, right? So that is the responsibility of the producer, right? So option 2 is matched with option 3, right? And the last one also is ensure that no damage is caused to the environment during storage and transportation. So this is, we saw this for the collection centers. It also applies to the dismantlers as well, because they have to further send it to the recyclers, right? So also no damage should be caused. So option 3 should be matched with option 1, and then only one is left, which is ensure that the e-waste generated is sent to the authorized collection centers, dismantlers, or recyclers, or returned to the collection centers or the take back services established by the producers, right? So this, the bulk consumers, they have to make sure that they are returning the e-waste to the proper authorized facilities, right? So that option 1 is matched with option 2. So this matching is given in option D. One responsibility 1 matched with stakeholder 2, responsibility 2 matched with stakeholder 3, and then responsibility 3 matched with stakeholder 1, right? So that's a correct matching. Right. So again, we saw this earlier for the producer. So with respect to the bulk consumer, they have to make sure that the e-waste generated from whatever product they have used is returned properly to the registered facilities. And also they should also keep records of what are the e-waste being generated, especially the bulk consumers, right? So bulk consumers are those who are purchasing a lot of these electronic products, right? For example, institutions or companies who buy, say for example, a lot of computers and so on. And then the dismantlers, again they have to obtain authorization and also register with SPCB. We saw this earlier. All the dismantlers, collection centers, and recyclers, they have to get this authorization, and also they have to ensure that no damage is caused to the environment when during the storage and the transportation. Okay, so question 4 is, which of the following is a responsibility of the State Pollution Control Board or the Pollution Control Committee, right? PCC. So the options are setting up collection centers or take back systems, either individually or collectively. Option B is ensure that no damage is caused to the environment during storage and transportation of e-waste. Option C, ensure that collection centers should not store the e-waste for a period of exceeding 180 days. Option D is none of these. So, which of these is the responsibility of the Pollution Control Board, specifically the State Pollution Control Board? We have an answer for option C. Any other answers? Okay, so let's take a look at the right answer. It is indeed option C. So the SPCB has to ensure that the collection centers should not be storing the e-waste for more than 180 days, right? So they should do the monitoring, right? So this is done at a state level. So within every state, they should ensure because they know how much, what is the e-waste handled by all the authorized collection centers, right? So we saw this as a responsibility of the collection center, that they have to maintain records of how much is the e-waste being handled, right? So they should use the form 2 to do that. And but in that way, the SPCB knows how much these collection centers are getting and when they are doing it, right? So they have the data and they will have to monitor and make sure that all these e-waste that are being collected by them they should send it out to the proper dismantlers and the recyclers before 180 days passes, right? So that is the responsibility of the State Pollution Control Board. Options A and B we could have eliminated because we already know that option A is the producer's responsibility. Option B is the collection center or the dismantler's responsibility, right? So those two we can eliminate. So C is the right answer. Right, so we saw this. So along with that, they have other responsibilities such as preparing inventories of e-waste. They also have to grant authorization and registration to all the other different facilities, right? They have to monitor that these authorized facilities, before they are given authorization, they comply to the rules. And also they have to maintain information on the conditions that are imposed for the authorization, and if there is any violation, again they have to take actions and penalize for the violations. And the last one is ensuring that this waste is not stored for more than 180 days by the collection centers. Okay, so question 5 is for the CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board. So which of these is the responsibility of the CPCB? Granting authorization and registration, preparation of guidelines for environmentally sound management of e-waste, preparation of inventories of e-waste. Option D is none of these. Okay, we have one answer, option B. Okay, any other answers? Okay, we have another answer as option B. Okay. Okay. So we'll take a look at the right answer. So it is option B, preparation of guidelines for environmentally sound management of e-waste. So that is indeed the responsibility of the Central Pollution Control Board. So just in the previous question, we saw that the SPCB is responsible for granting authorization on the registration and as well as preparation of inventories of e-waste, right? So these are done at a state level, right? So we need more control over this authorization and also this maintaining of inventory. So this is more appropriate to be carried out at a state level. Therefore A and C are responsibilities of the State Pollution Control Board, whereas the environmentally sound guidelines, so these are more general, right? So these need not be specifically made for each state. So these are more generic and applicable throughout the country. Therefore this is option B is the responsibility of the Central Pollution Control Board. Okay, so option B is the right answer. Right. So along with that, the CPCB has also other responsibilities such as they need to also coordinate with the SPCB, and we saw the preparation of guidelines for for managing e-waste. They also have to conduct assessments of how much e-waste is being generated and processed, and all the other documentations and data compilations, because all the other agencies, they would be sending their reports to the CPCB, right, every year annually. So they have to compile all this data and come up with documentations and reports, and then using that they will have to come up with recommendations of standards and specifications, and they will also have to conduct training and awareness programs, and they will be submitting reports to the ministry, right, along with setting targets of when these should rules be implemented, when they should be completed, and so on, and also provide initiatives for IT industries for reducing hazardous substances. So specifically for IT industries, because they are the bulk consumers of electronic products, right? So and also they'll be generating or producing a lot of e-waste. Okay, so question 6. So we are moving away from the rules. So for which of the following component of a cathode ray tube CRT, lead content is more in color CRTs than monochrome CRTs? So if you compare color CRTs with monochrome CRTs, so which component has more lead content? So the options are the neck portion, option B is face, option C is frit, option D is none of these. Okay, we have one answer, option B, face. Okay, let's just wait for one more minute for other answers. Okay, another answer as option B as well. Okay. Any other answers? Okay, so let's take a look at the right one. So B is not the correct answer. The right answer is option C, frit. Okay, so we saw the difference between the color CRTs and the monochrome CRTs in terms of the lead content, right? So the figure on the left shows what is the percentage by weight of lead in the different portions of the CRT, right, for a color CRT. So if we see, funnel has 24% by weight lead content, neck has 30%, and the face has very minimal of 0 to 3%. But the frit has 70% of it is made up of lead, right? So that is a very large portion of it made up of lead. Whereas in the monochrome CRTs, we don't have a frit, but the other components like face has 0 to 3%, funnel has 4%, and neck has 30%, right? So except funnel, it is comparable to the color CRTs, right? Also, the funnel has lower lead content. So if we between these two, if we consider, it is only the frit which has the largest content of lead between these two, right? So even though frit is not present, so it is present in color CRTs and has the higher lead content. So therefore, frit is the right answer. Okay, so question 7 is, which of the following test is used to determine if an e-waste is hazardous or not? The options are toxicity characteristics, leaching procedure, toxicity characteristics, leaking parameter, toxicity characteristics, leaching parameter. Option D is none of these. You have one answer, option A. Any other answers? Right, another answer is option A. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at the right one. So option A is correct. Toxicity characteristics leaching procedure is the test that we use to determine if an e-waste is hazardous or not. Right. So we have looked at the TCLP test multiple times throughout the course, right? But we have been saying it as TCLP, so we might have forgotten what it stands for, right? So it is the expansion of it is toxicity characteristics leaching procedure, right? So as the name suggests, so this is a test for the toxicity characteristic of the waste, right? So we want to determine whether it is hazardous or not. So how do we do that? We follow a procedure where we try to leach out the components or the hazardous substances present within that waste, and then try to measure that concentration of it, right, in the leachate, and then compare that with the standard, and then if the concentration of the hazardous content exceeds the permissible limits, then we say that this is a hazardous waste, right? So it is not, we have to take more care when we are disposing it off in a landfill, right? So that's the toxicity characteristic leaching procedure. So we do this for municipal waste, and we can do that for the e-waste as well. Right. So e-waste, even though it is not explicitly listed as hazardous waste, it does contain hazardous material. Therefore, we need to do the TCLP test to determine its toxicity. Right. So the hazardous nature is established through the toxicity characteristic, the result of the toxicity characteristic, and the TCLP test helps us do that. Right. So as we see here, for different metals, we have established standards which tell us what is the permissible concentrations, right? And it should not be exceeded. Okay. So question 8 is, match the following extraction technologies. So we have three of them with their respective methodological description regarding waste electrical and electronic equipment recycling. Right. So we have options: hydrometallurgical technology, pyrometallurgical process, and biometallurgical process. So we need to match that with bioleaching, cyanide leaching, melting. So which process is mapped to which technology? Okay, we have one answer, option B. Okay, any other answers? So far we have only one answer. Okay, so we'll take a look at the right option. It is in fact option B, right? So it says hydrometallurgical is cyanide leaching, pyrometallurgical is smelting, and biometallurgical is bioleaching, right? So we looked at hydrometallurgical process in the previous week, right? So we had options of like cyanide leaching, thiourea leaching, thiosulfate leaching, halide leaching, and so on, right? So all these different processes that we are talking about are used during the recycling phase, right? So where we try to extract some useful or valuable metals from our e-waste, right? Like gold, silver, copper, and so on, right? So we have different technologies for doing that. So in a hydrometallurgical process, we use an aqueous solution where, such as the cyanide leaching process, where we try to make these metals into some solid into a soluble component, right? So we try to make these metals soluble in an aqueous solution, and then we could separate out the metal from the rest of rest of the material that is present in the waste, right? So then we could, once we have made it soluble and then it is leached out, then we could use other processes such as adsorption to then separate out the metal from that aqueous solution. So that is the hydrometallurgical process. So one example of that is the cyanide leaching. So this is a very good process. Like for example, gold or silver, those metals are leached out using the cyanide leaching process. The second one is the pyrometallurgical. So as the word pyro suggests, it has to do with heat or fire, right? So smelting is the process which comes under pyrometallurgical process. So where we try to melt the ore or the concentrate that contains the metal that we want along with other impurities. So when we do this smelting, so what happens, we make it into a molten form. And then the heavier metal, denser metal, it comes to the bottom, and then the remaining slag, so that will be floating on the top, right? So it will have a lesser density, and then those could be separated out and then taken off. Also other processes will be other materials will be some could be converted into gases because at the high heat, and that will also be easily separated, right? So the metal can be extracted. So that is the pyrometallurgical process. The third one is the biometallurgical process. So that is the bioleaching, right? So similar to how we are using some material like cyanide, to do the leaching. So in the biometallurgical process, instead we use the microorganisms to do the leaching for us, right? Why do we do that? Because for example, in the cyanide leaching, cyanide, as we know, it is a poisonous substance, right? So there is some so it has some disadvantages in from the health aspect. Therefore, bio leaching is seen as a better alternative in terms of doing it, right? So because it doesn't have those negative effects. So that is the biometallurgical process. So that right matching is given in option B. So question 9, numerical problem. Suppose in the year of 2020, the total sale of mobile is 5 lakh 75,000. Assume lifespan of new mobile to be 3 years. Among the total obsolete mobiles, 40% are further stored, 25% are landfill, and the remaining 35% are further recycled. So the lifespan of recycled and stored items is 3 years. So based on this above data, the total quantity of mobile in numbers to be landfilled in the year of 2023 would be how much? Right. So the options are 1,99,000, 89,000, 1,43,750, and 1,65,000. So you can take a couple of minutes to work it out. So if the question is not clear, please do ask. We have one answer as option C, 1,43,750. We'll just give 1 more minute for others to complete. Okay, do we have any other answers? Okay, so we'll take a look at the right answer. It is in fact option C, 1,43,750 would be the total number of mobiles that will go to the landfill in 2023, right? So before we look at how that number came up, so we'll try to understand the question. So we are given that in 2020, 5,75,000 mobile phones were sold, right? So that is the total number, and we are also told that the lifespan of a new mobile is 3 years, right? So all these 5,75,000 mobiles after 3 years will become obsolete, right? In 2023, 5,75,000 mobiles will become obsolete. So we are also told that among the total obsolete mobiles, 40% will be stored, right? It will not be nothing will be done to that. It will just be kept in storage for 40%. The 25% will be sent to landfill, right? So they will be disposed, and the rest 35% will go for recycling, right? And then so this, which the mobiles which are getting stored or which are getting recycled, so those will have another 3 years of life, right? So they can be used for 3 more years if they are stored or if they are going for recycling, right? So which means that by the year 2026, all these 5,75,000 mobiles will end up in the landfill. That is by 2026. But the question is asking how much will go to the landfill in 2023, right? So which is 3 years from 2020, right? So we know by the end of this 3 years of sales, only 25% are going to the landfill, right? So that is the right answer. So if you just work it out, right? So total mobiles sold in 2020 is 5,75,000, right? And lifespan of a mobile is equal to 3 years, right? And 25% of mobiles sold in 2020 go to landfill in after the end of life, right? So end of life is 3 years. So which is 2020 plus 3 years is 2023. So number sent to landfill in 2023 is nothing but this 25% of the sales that happened in 2020. So which is 5,75,000, right? So this is 0.25 times 5,75,000. So if you do that calculation, it will come out to be 1,43,750, right? So this is the number of mobiles that end up in landfill by 2023. So the rest of those mobiles which were in storage or recycling, so they will also end up in landfill, but in the year of 2026. Okay, so that's how we got that number. Any questions? Okay, if there is no question, we'll move on to question number 10. Which of the following statements are true for e-waste management and handling rules under the Environmental Protection Act 2011? So the options are: the consumer of electrical and electronic equipments is responsible for the entire life cycle of its own branded product, and in particular the environmentally sound end of life management. Option B is the same, but it is for the producer. Option C is reduction of hazardous substances used in e-equipment. Option D is increase in hazardous substances used in e-equipment. So from now on, we'll be looking at multiple select questions. So more than one of these options could be correct. We have one option as B. Okay, another answer as well for B. Okay, one answer as A. Okay, both B and C. Okay, again B. Okay. Okay, everyone agrees with option B. Okay, what about C and D? Okay, so let's take a look at the answer. So B is indeed correct. Also, C is also a correct option, right? So between A and B, we saw that this is nothing but the extended producer responsibility, right? So each electrical and electronic equipment producer, so they have to make sure that the EVs produced from their products, right, throughout the whole life cycle, right from the manufacturing till its end of life. So they should make sure that those EVs are being properly collected and then managed in a environmentally sound manner, right? So that is the producer's responsibility, right? So the consumer is only responsible for dropping off the electronic wastes to the proper authorized facility, right? So it that is only at the end of life. So they are not responsible for the entire life cycle of the product. It is the producer who is responsible for the entire life cycle. So that's why option B is right. Between C and D, the Rules and Environmental Protection Act, so they say that the hazardous substances that are used in the electronic equipment, so they should be reduced, right? So we have to reduce the usage or the quantity of the hazardous substances that go into these electrical and electronic products, right? So we don't want to use more of these. So therefore, option C is right. Okay, so B and C are the right options. So this was a part of the objectives of the e-waste tool. So along with these two, we had other objectives such as to minimize the illegal recycling, right? So you want to do a proper recycling, not done by the not registered facilities. So where they are trying to recover some valuable components, but end up doing more harm than in the recycling process. So we want to minimize that, and also they want the e-waste rules try to come up with regulations for the different processes associated with e-waste management, right from generation, collection, storage, transportation, as well as importing waste and also exporting waste, right? So these are the items that the e-waste tool focuses on. Okay, so question 11 is which of these are the duties of the dismantler? Options are obtain authorization and registration and ensure that the facility and recycling processes are in accordance with the guidelines. Option B is ensure that the dismantled e-waste are segregated, non-recyclable, non-recoverable components are sent to the registered recycling facilities for the recovery of materials. Option C is ensure that processes do not have any adverse effect on the health and the environment in accordance with guidelines published by the CPCB. And option D is taking action against violations of the standards and guidelines. Okay, B and C, one answer. Another answer is option C. Okay, and one more as options A, B, and C. Okay, so the right answer options are only B and C. Right, so option A is about the recycling process, right? So I said earlier that all the dismantlers, recyclers, as well as even collection centers, they have to register and obtain authorization from the SPCB, right? But here we are saying that it is not only for the facility but also for the recycling process. But dismantlers don't do it's only for dismantling purpose, not recycling. Some facilities may have this combined, but here we are only focusing on dismantler specifically. Therefore, option A is not correct. So option B is saying ensure that the dismantled e-waste are properly segregated and the recoverable and the non-recyclable components are sent to the correct recycling facility or the registered recycling facilities. That is indeed the dismantler's responsibility. Option C is that ensure that these processes do not have any adverse effect on the health and the environment as per the guidelines. Right. So while doing this dismantling, they should not do any damage to the environment. So that is also a responsibility of the dismantler. And option D, taking actions against violations of standards and guidelines. So the dismantler doesn't do anything. So if they violate, the SPCB will take actions against these violations, right? So it is not the dismantler's responsibility, but the SPCB or the State Pollution Control Board's responsibility, right? So when options B and C are the right ones. Okay, so we already saw this in other questions as well. So they have to ensure that the processes that they have to do not adversely affect the health and the environment, and they have to dismantle and segregate these and then send it to the registered facilities. Also, they need to, in addition to that, they have to file a return as per to the SPCV, and then any process for recovery or refining should not be carried out by the dismantler, right? So their job is only for dismantling. The recovery of the materials, they should be done by the registered recyclers, right? So it should not happen by the dismantler. So these are the responsibilities of dismantling. So question 12 is, which of the following organic chemicals are generally found in WEEE? So the options are flame retardants, mercury, polychlorinated biphenyls, and silver. Okay, one answer option A and C. Okay, another answer option A. Okay, okay, any other answers? Okay, another answer option A. Okay. Okay, so we look at the right answer. So first, we can eliminate option B and D because they are inorganics, right? So the only organics are found in the flame retardants and polychlorinated biphenyl. So those are the correct options. So those are the those contain the organic chemicals. So flame retardants, so we use that so that we do not, so these equipments do not catch fire, right? So for examples, in wires we may have it, or cables. So that, because we expect heat to be generated from the use of these equipment, so we have these flame retardants containing organic chemicals like brominated flame retardants we saw in the previous week. So those are used. And also PCBs, the polychlorinated biphenyl. So these are used in the printed wire boards, right? So these are also organic chemicals. So options A and C are the right ones. So we may not find them in a huge quantity, but still trace amount of these are present in the electronic wastes. So we saw this as part of the characterization of WEEE. So we have some inorganic chemicals and some organics. So mostly inorganic, such as lead, mercury, cadmium, beryllium, arsenic, silver, and so on. So the organics in PCBs are the polychlorinated biphenyls and the flame retardants. Okay, so question 13 is, what are the difficulties in performing the TCLP test on the WEEE? Options are collection of a representative sample, presence of heavy metals, moisture content, size reduction. Okay, we have one option B, option A. Okay, okay, another option A. So far we have got only single options. So these are multiple select questions. So think about if any other option also could be a difficulty. Okay, A and C. Okay, so let's take a look at the right answer. So the right answers are options A and D. So the collection of a representative sample and as well as the size reduction. So those are the difficulties when we do a TCLP test on the electronic waste in particular, right? So why option A is difficult? Because for a TCLP test, what do we need? We need a 100-gram sample, right? So when we have a electronic waste, so if we do not have a representative sample, if we just take 100 grams from some components, right? Because an e-waste has multiple components, right? So we have different elements like we have plastics, we have metals, we have glass. So if we suppose we have a computer, right? So if we just take the casing, so mostly it could be plastics so these days, right? So if we just take the 100 grams from that, so we would not find any harmful substances there mostly, right? So because it is just plastic. So this 100 grams that if we take it from just the casing, so that may not be a representative sample, so that is not representing what is actually present in the e-waste as a whole, right? Because we will find these hazardous substances mostly in the PCBs and other components, right? So not generally not in the casings. So we should make sure the sample that we take is representative of the waste as a whole. Therefore, therefore our sample should contain all these different elements. So the plastics, the heavy metals, other organics and inorganics, right? So therefore, that sample collection becomes difficult because we have these multiple components. So that becomes a difficulty. And the other option is size reduction, right? So because these are bulky substances, so reducing them, because for the TCLP test we need to have these waste cut down to 1 centimeter, right? So the size of the waste should be 1 centimeter or lesser, because we are going to perform a leaching procedure, right? So for that, higher is the surface area, better will be the leaching, right? Because we want to be more conservative, we want to make sure that we are not missing out any hazardous things, so we want a smaller surface area. So for that we need to reduce the size, but because size reduction of these electronic waste is not that easy, right? So that is also a difficulty. Moisture content is not an issue. We do not have high moisture content in electronic waste, so even if it is there, it is generally not going to affect our TCLP test much, right? And presence of heavy metal, it is not a difficulty because our test is for detecting the heavy metals, right? So we want to detect what the heavy metals are and also what is the concentration of them, so that we know whether it is permissible or not, right? So that is not a difficulty, but is the objective of doing the test, right? So the right options are only options A and D, right? So we saw this. So the collection of a representative sample and the size reduction are the difficulties. Okay, so question 14 is, what are the potential concerns of incineration of WEEE? Options are metal accumulation in ash, generation of dioxins, difficulty in size reduction, generation of furan. One answer is option A, B, and D. Okay, Okay, the same answer again. Option A, B, and D. Any other answers? Okay, so we look at the right option. So options A, B, and D are correct. So metal accumulation in the ash, generation of dioxins, and generation of furans are concerns for when we do incineration of the electronic waste, right? So difficulty in size reduction, it's not a problem. It's not required to do a size reduction as we need for the TCLP test. So when you go for incineration, right? So that is not an issue. But the other three are issues, because so when we do incineration, so we produce ash, we produce some fly ash, we produce some bottom ash, right? So the metals that are present in the electronic waste could get into this ash contaminated. And what is the issue there? It is some of these ash should go to disposal, right? So sometimes we reuse these ash for some purposes. So even in those case, contamination of that will be an issue. But when we even bigger issue is when we dispose of these, right? So when it has to go to a landfill, and potentially these metals could leach out and then contaminate our soil and groundwater, right? So that's why it's a concern. And with respect to option B and D, generation of dioxins and furans. So whenever we incinerate waste, so these are issues. Production of dioxins and furans. So these are groups of chemicals that are known to be toxic, right? So therefore they contaminate the air, water, and soil, right? So these dioxins and furans. And because we have some of these organic chemicals that we saw earlier, right? So this flame retardants, brominated flame retardants, and PCBs. So upon incinerations, these will lead to dioxin and furan generation, right? So and therefore these have health impacts, right? So this could, if it contaminates the water, and then it could get into the fat tissues of animals, and through that it could get into the our diets, and ultimately it affects our human health as well as the environment. So therefore these three are concerns when you go for incineration, right? So these things we should keep in mind when we are trying to do this as a potential process for managing e-waste. Okay, right. So this is the last question for this session. So if you have any questions or doubts, you can ask. If you don't have any questions, so we can conclude the session. So this week 12 was the final week of lectures, because this is a 12-week course, and therefore this will be our last live session as well. So I hope you found these problem solving sessions useful and helpful in completing your assignments. So if you have any feedback or suggestions on how to make these sessions more interactive and better for the future courses and sessions. So we can leave that. And I thank you all for attending these sessions and being interactive. Thank you and all the best for your exams. Yeah, thank you. If you have no questions, you can log out.